kings and queens. Welcome to Faith Helps Podcast, and I'm your host, Diamond Booth. Hello, hello, hello. How are y'all doing? How's your week going? How are you feeling? How's February treating you so far? This month of recognizing love and Black history. Y'all got any plans for this month? And if you do, drop them in the comments. So if you guys follow me on IG, you may have seen my post of the Hearth Memorial to the enslaved that I got to go to and tour and see. I also got to tour the inside of the historic Wren building, and it was a very humbling experience, and it also reminded me to not take for granted the opportunities, the resources and support that I have been blessed abundantly with and have been made available to me, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to embrace those opportunities throughout the rest of this month, make efforts to really and truly not take time nor freedom for granted. Now, some of y'all have just completely surprised me and melted my little old heart. Shout out to Joy and Mimi, who sent me some of the sweetest messages on Instagram about episode, I think it was 2 and 4, Take Territory, and the mess of redefining. I absolutely appreciate the feedback and also appreciate the encouragement. My personal friends as well, thank you guys for the feedback and encouragement, support, and the love. I'm really grateful to hear what you guys take away from the episode. So yeah, definitely comment, DM, whatever feels most comfortable to you. Keep it coming, all right? It was also brought to my attention that I referenced my IG on these pods, but never actually dropped my tag. So my bad. It's just my name at DYMONDBOOTH. And a few of you have been asking me to make these episodes available on Apple Music or Apple Podcasts. I hear you guys. I'm not ignoring you, and I am planning to get them uploaded on there as well. Really and truly, I've just been giving myself grace to take my time and ramp things up slowly, very slowly, as I'm getting my bearings and finding my rhythm and my confidence. I'm still learning how to manage and juggle some of these technical things, and I'm just enjoying the process, So bear with me as I get my footing. It's coming, especially as I am currently in my final semester of my grad program and working on finishing gloriously, not just strong, in that area of my life as well. So just be patient, loves, please, and thank you. In the meantime, kick back and enjoy the show. Take notes on what to do and what not to do. Allow my process to be your live action movie lesson, okay? Anywho, last week we kicked off this month with my lovey-dovey mushiness just to bamboozle you into dying to yourself. Everyone who tuned in last week knows what I'm referencing, and if not, you already know what I'm gonna say. Go check it out. Check it out. Okay, so as I said, this month we're chatting about all aspects of relationships and that broad term love from a holistic, realistic, and restorative perspective. Today will be no different, especially since next week is Valentine's Day. Now, before you book that reservation, before you buy the roses and the chocolates, before you send that hey big head text, pump the brakes. Just for a moment, pump the brakes. I want to talk to you guys about some friends I met, and their names are Mr. and Ms. Potential. Mr. and Ms. Potential are really cool to be around sometimes. They make you laugh, they smell good and dress nice. Sure, they may be disrespectful and they may not be so loyal, but at least they know how to have a good time, right? Many of us are finding ourselves settling for Mr. or Ms. Potential. And with Valentine's Day coming up, it can feel like even more pressure to find somebody, anybody, and ultimately settle for a counterfeit just to avoid feeling alone. Or because your hormones are raging and you can't see straight. I know the feeling. But don't settle and don't date Mr. or Ms. Potential. I was talking to a good friend of mine. He's a great guy, very chivalrous, independent, educated, and a whole thirst trap to some of these ladies out here. But we were talking about this chick in particular that he had been seriously dating for about 6-ish months. He was telling me about all these like super great things he likes about her sense of humor. She's also educated. I believe she has her master's and is pursuing her doctorate. She's goal oriented, loves traveling, cooks like a 5-star chef, body like a goddess, voice of an angel, the whole shebang. But his one hiccup was that she had a mean streak of throwing tantrums like a toddler whenever she didn't get her way. Like throwing stuff at him if he gave her the silent treatment during a disagreement, or grabbing the steering wheel while they were on their way to the movies just because he said no to stopping at a store that she saw, and then cursing him out in public for liking other girls' pictures. All of these things that likely could have been resolved through a simple, mature conversation turned into these raging tantrums that were often embarrassing, often led to a lot of disrespect and a lot of unnecessary chaos. And I've known him for a while now, so as he's telling me all of this, I'm just looking at him like, why are you still with her, bruh? Like, yeah, she may have a voice of an angel, but she's got a temper of a demon. Like, what is going on? And with the most sincere face, he turns and says, man, I know, but she just has so much potential to be the one. And that is exactly what gets people caught up in these cycles of unhealthy and toxic relationships. Believe what people are showing you about themselves. Don't throw glitter on it and call it potential. And if they are straight up telling you what's up, if they're telling you this is who I am and I don't plan on changing, or they keep saying they're going to change and don't, believe them. Don't gaslight yourself into thinking you heard them wrong or they don't actually mean it. Don't stick around trying to convince yourself that they're just testing you or they're eventually going to come around. Baby, enroll at your local community college if you want some tests and you want to learn more. Accept them for who they are, who they're showing you that they are, and move on. A lot of times people get so caught up waiting for the person to change, or even worse, trying to force them to change. And as a result, they end up wasting away years of their life and stressing themselves out, prolonging the heartbreak of eventually being forced to come to terms with the fact that they are not going to change. And it may be that they are going to change, but just not for you. And you have to learn to accept that. I know that's a bit of a hit to the ego, but it's truth. People change when they want to and for whom they want to. Don't take it personal. Don't waste the neurons you have left on them picking yourself apart, trying to figure out what's wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. I mean, there might be some areas in your life that you could grow and get better, but to waste the time that you don't have and the energy that you also don't have trying to figure out how you can change yourself to better make this mismatch puzzle fit together is not smart. People change when they want, that's a desire to, and for whom they want to. And it is your responsibility to make the decision to not settle. Date someone's reality, not their potential. Don't date someone for the hopes of their potential and what you think they could be or become. If you don't get nothing else after this, get this. Do not date potential. Period. For some of you, that's not a problem. For some of us, it is. When it comes to dating and romantic relationships, even friendships, people settle for someone's potential instead of their reality for a number of reasons. And as I go through just a few of them, I'd like for you to take a moment to just do a little mental scan of the quality of your own relationships, your situationships and friendships, and try to be as honest with yourself as possible, okay? One of the biggest reasons I see people settling for potential versus accepting reality is that they have fear. FOMO. Fear of missing out. They are afraid of missing out on that version of the person that they see the potential for them to become. Sometimes we see the potential of a person and think, if I could just hang in there, or if I could just get them to do X, Y, Z. Or we get caught up in the endless possibilities of what if. What if they are going to eventually change? What if I gave up too soon? What if it's not me and they just need more time? What if I just wait? Well, how long are you willing to wait? And at what risk? First off, this is why knowing yourself is so important. Know your values, know your expectations, know your boundaries, your non-negotiables, your triggers, your flaws, and know your growth edges. Become familiar with these parts of you because they eventually help you filter out when a relationship is not healthy and worth the pursuit versus when it is a you thing and you need to work on addressing or improving some parts of yourself. There is also the fear of the unknown. Letting go of Mr. or Ms. Potential also means putting yourself in a position of uncertainty because you don't know for sure what the future will bring. You don't know if you're making the right choice. You don't know if the next person will be worse or better or the same. You're taking a chance on what is not guaranteed. Now, this might not be an issue on you depending on what type of dating you're doing. For instance, if you and Mr. or Ms. Potential are the same page and have decided to date exclusively, then this might decided not to date exclusively. Then this might not be an issue because you are still remaining open to dating other people. And let's be clear, when I say date, I'm not saying sex. Dating someone does not automatically equate to sexing someone. It doesn't mean that if you're dating multiple people, you are sexing everyone on the roster. No. Healthy and clear-minded dating is getting to know people and assessing compatibility, which takes time. And oftentimes we get in trouble because we're having sex with all the people that we're dating because we want to see how good it's going to be. We want to get a sample, an appetizer. And that actually clouds our judgment because we're thinking that our hormones are raging. We're thinking about what felt good instead of the reality of what's going on between the two of you when it comes to those interpersonal values and factors, such as the compatibility of your values and your non-negotiables and your future goals and plans. I often tell my young adult clients that you don't truly know someone until you've seen them in all seasons of their life. What I mean by this is, how do they react or function when they are mad or angry? How do they treat others when they are upset? How do they handle grief, death, and loss, and not just related to a person in their life, but also with a job or career or plans? What is their go-to coping mechanisms when they are stressed out or overwhelmed? Seeing this can expose patterns of behavior that might be an issue later on down the road. When they are happy or excited, do they switch up on you and start acting brand new? Do they change how they treat you depending on their mood? These are all things to know. And they can give you a lot of information on recognizing whether or not you're dating Mr. or Ms. Potential or Mr. or Ms. The One. And secondly, it's familiarity. Oftentimes people settle for dating Mr. or Ms. Potential because it mirrors their prior experiences with relationships, or it mirrors what they observed and learned about relationships growing up. It's familiar. Like, for example, if you observed parents who constantly resolve disagreements by name calling and swinging on each other, then you may find yourself settling for those same exact patterns of behavior in a relationship because it's familiar. It's what you're used to. And familiarity is comfortable because we know what to expect. We know how to prepare or brace ourselves for certain things. It's comfortable. New is often sometimes scary because we don't know what to expect. Thirdly, which yet another reason I commonly see is that comfort. When you've been dating someone for a period of time, you get comfortable. You know them, the good, the bad, everything in between. And oftentimes we get hung up on what's comfortable instead of accepting the reality of the situation and condition of the relationship. We forget to consider what is healthiest. Yet another C word I often see happening is convenience. I've seen so many people I know settling for convenience, which I get it. Dating is hard. Convenience is easier. Yeah, maybe your values are completely misaligned with yours, but at least they make time for you and they're always available when you call, right? That's convenience. In these situations, it is important for you to not only know yourself, but know your non-negotiables. Know whether or not the misalignment of values may become a bigger issue in the future. Maybe it's not that big of an issue right now, but think about it if, for example, you were gonna have kids in the future. How do you each plan to collaboratively decide what to or not to teach your children? If there are certain traditions that you guys don't have in alignment, what traditions will you guys decide to or not to practice? And how will that be decided even if you remain without children? Will that impact how you guys divvy up time with family? And this is just a very surface level list of reasons. There are tons of other reasons why people settle. We don't even talk about like some of the major ones that can be a factor, such as cultural or economical reasons why people settle. But I'm saving that for another pod, hopefully in March, and I'm hoping to have a good friend of mine, soon to be Dr. Leabet, join us for that conversation. So stay tuned. Now, in the meantime, there can be this long list of various reasons why people might be settling for Mr. or Ms. Potential, and yet they can be completely unaware of it. Some people don't realize that they are settling. Earlier, I mentioned the importance of knowing your values, expectations, boundaries, and non-negotiables. The reason why these are so important is because they serve as your filtering system. For my research enthusiasts, you can think of them as exclusion criteria. In research and clinical work, exclusion criteria is how we determine best fit or whether or not an individual should be excluded from a study or particular treatment modality. So So like yesterday, I had the chance to attend a seminar on chiropractic services, and the doctor was explaining how some of her exclusion criteria for referrals to her services were people who have a particular phobia of needles, or people with severe chronic mental health issues, or that have like a lot of impulsivity, or people who are prone to fainting, those sorts of things. And she listed quite a few others, but I can't remember them right now. But the point is, that was her exclusion criteria for who did or did not have access and receive her services with chiropractic. Perhaps your exclusion criteria might look like age. Maybe you don't want to date someone who's within a certain age range. Or maybe your exclusion criteria looks like cultural factors that are important to you, or religious values that you want to have in alignment with that person. Or maybe that you guys have specific sexual boundaries. All of these are things to consider, because that might help you determine whether or not you want to continue seeing and talking to that person. In addition to exclusion criteria, here are some things to also just watch out for. You can call them red flags or stop signs. Maybe there's abuse. That's a red flag. If it's verbal, emotional, psychological, physical, sexual, any type of abuse should be your red flag or stop sign. That's when you know that, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Potential has to go. They are not the one. And other red flags and stop signs might look like if they don't respect your boundaries. If you set a limit and they have a full-on tantrum, or they don't respect that you ask them not to call you at a certain time because you are either at work or whatever obligation you're dealing with, and they are not able to understand that and accept it, that's a stop sign. That's a red flag. Because if they'll disrespect and cross your boundaries in just the dating phase, they're going to continue it later on in the relationship. Another red flag or stop sign that you could think of is if you guys have very extreme different sets of how you guys go about your values. For example, if they are very strict on religion and very strict on upholding certain religious practices in their relationships and in their future marriage, and you're not, then that's a red flag or stop sign for you, because that's not something that you value or would want to ascribe to. These are things to talk about. Skip the whole "what's your favorite color" question. Ask people about their values, their expectations, their goals. Another stop sign might be if you guys are talking about the plans that you have 5 or 10 years from now, and they're like, I want to travel the world and live in another country for a majority of my life. If you know that it's super important to you to stay close to family and that you don't want to do a long distance relationship, that's a stop sign for you, because that relationship isn't going to go anywhere, because you guys have such drastically different plans for what you want the future to look like. And taking time to sit down and write out some of your non-negotiables will really help you with this process, because it can also guide you on what questions to ask when that certain person comes into your life. Think about, what do you actually want? Think about what's important to you. Of course, there may be things that aren't as important. Like, for example, maybe you don't really care about height, but you care if they go to church every Sunday. Or maybe you don't care about race, but it's really important to you that they are aware of how race impacts you and the family system. Maybe one of your non-negotiables is that you have to be with someone who's going to be present in the home and in the parenting process. Maybe you don't want to be with someone who has a job that could call them away across the country at any moment in any time for undisclosed hours or days or even months at a time. These are things to think about. What to do in the meantime, though, is writing out those lists, but also getting peace with yourself before the person. If you don't like being with you, why would someone else want to be with you? Please explain that. Take time to get comfortable with you. Take time to get comfortable getting to know yourself and being with yourself. Don't ignore those areas of growth that you could be working on. Take yourself on some dates. Take time in community, because a lot of times the issues that we have in our problematic patterns of behavior, they often show up when we are in community amongst other people. Maybe the feedback that you've been getting from your closest friends is not necessarily them hating on you. Maybe it is something that you actually need to look into considering working on. Take time to really get to know your own habits. Examine how you function on a day-to-day basis throughout the week. What habits do you have that could be a problem in the future if there was another person living in that space with you? What tendencies do you need to maybe start correcting now, or ones that you want to start as you're preparing for that person? Don't just sit and wait for them to be dropped on your doorstep. Make time to become the type of partner you want to be for your future partner. That takes preparation. That takes a lot of mental work also, because it requires you to be, number one, honest with yourself, but also very reflective. Take time to journal about what's coming up for you. I strongly advise going to therapy, because a lot of things can come up in therapy that you never realize. I've known a lot of people who go to therapy and they feel like everything's fine, but then once they start getting into the crux of things and patterns and behaviors that they want to change, it turns into something completely different, because they didn't realize how some of their patterns today are connected to patterns from their past or a trauma from their past. So I advise you, encourage you to make the time to go to therapy. Try it out. It's good to have an unbiased, objective point of view on what could be happening. And you can grow from these perspectives. You can develop new strategies for coping. Maybe the coping skills that you currently have aren't that effective. And if you get with someone in a relationship, you may not know how your current coping skills might become a problem. For example, if your typical coping skill for stress is to go binge drink, that might be a problem for your future partner. And that's a problem for you, because it's not healthy and it's not wise. And it leads to a lot of other risks, such as dependency. So it's important for you to flesh out these things now before you get into the relationship. Another thing that I would say is, don't ignore or neglect the relationships that you do have that are fruitful and healthy, whether they be friendships or family and colleagues. Take time to pour into those relationships. I was once talking with a friend, and she was explaining to me how she was going about her dating experience and journey. And she had pretty much isolated herself because she wanted to just find Mr. Right. And she was going on year 4 of that. What she didn't realize is that she was cutting out all these people because she was so focused on how am I gonna snag Mr. Right? How am I gonna find this person or that person? And she didn't realize that you don't know the lifespan of the people that are connected to you until they're gone. So instead of spending all this time focusing and searching and breaking your own heart trying to find Mr. Right, take time to value the relationships around you. Pour into them. Spend time with them. You don't need to have a date for Valentine's Day. You don't need to go find and settle for Mr. or Ms. Potential just because you don't want to be alone on Valentine's Day. Maybe you need to be alone so that you can deal with some of those inner challenges and things that you've been avoiding or eluding because they're uncomfortable or unsettling. Again, if you don't like being with you, why would someone else? And if you don't like being with you, that's where you start. If it's not therapy, I encourage you to take time to start getting into healthy practices, whether it be yoga or meditation or free association. These are all things that you can do to work on yourself internally and physically. But they're therapeutic things that you can do independently if you're not feeling ready for therapy. But as you start doing those things and working on you, you'll notice the change in how you start to look at life. You'll notice the change in how you start to engage in your relationships with others. You'll notice the change in how you start to function on a day-to-day basis and feeling happy and at peace instead of feeling like you're dwelling in your loneliness. Something that I heard someone say once is that you're not lonely, you're not alone, you are with yourself. Sometimes we need to practice reframing how we're seeing our current situation. If you're constantly seeing your situation as, oh, I'm alone, then you're gonna constantly feel alone. What's healthier to do is to reframe it as, I'm with myself, I'm spending time with me. For those of you who are more spiritually oriented, I'm spending time with God. I'm getting to know and build up a pattern of seeking God so that when that right person does come along, I have the discernment to know whether or not they're a red flag and a stop sign, or if they are the right one. You'll be able to differentiate between, is this someone who is about to be a stumbling block and they're just Mr. or Ms. Potential, versus, no, this is someone who I could build with. This is someone who I do have the same values and alignment with. We are compatible. We are willing to work through any challenges, because in reality, all relationships are going to have challenges. There is no such thing as a perfect relationship. There's no such thing as even perfect family or friendships. There is always going to be work. It always baffles me how when we get married, we expect to say for better or for worse, but we don't apply that same logic to our other relationships. In reality, there may be for better or for worse times in your friendships. There may be for better or for worse times within your family. Why don't we extend that same commitment? It's important for us to really take a moment to sit back and evaluate not just how we're going about our dating, but how are we going about relationships in general. Because oftentimes, believe it or not, how you're showing up in these other relationships can be very reflective to how you show up in your relationship with Mr. or Ms. Potential. If you have the habit and the pattern of interrupting your friends without them getting a chance to finish their sentence or their thought, you're going to carry over that same pattern with your spouse. So why not work on it now, before that person comes along? Because goodness forbid they do come along and you haven't done the work on yourself and they decide, you know what, you are Mr. or Ms. Potential. And they have to leave because they have done the work on themselves, but you didn't do the work on you. So iron out some of those crooks and wrinkles that could be a potential hiccup in that future relationship. If you know you have a foul mouth and you go for the jugular when you get upset, work on that now, before the person. Because when you get with that person, if you haven't done your own work, you are going to pass that along into that relationship and potentially ruin A relationship that could have blossomed beautifully because you were wrestling and rolling all over finding the person instead of wrestling with yourself and those parts of you that need to be corrected, need to be worked through. So, before you send that text, make that call, or schedule that date, take a moment to think about these things. Number one, are you about to settle to go and be with someone who is Mr. or Ms. Potential, and you know that they don't have the same values, they don't have the same belief systems, or those things that are important to you for a long-term relationship that is healthy? Number two, think about your own non-negotiables. You have no business even out there in the dating world if you don't know what yours are, because that's how you start to negotiate things that should be non-negotiable, because you don't have a clear-minded perspective of what they should be. You start to compromise on things that you know are not for you, things that you know are important. I don't care how much you like the person. If the non-negotiables ain't looking right, and the things that you said, this is what I absolutely need to have in a relationship, if that's not there, you need to say goodbye. You need to let them go, because it's not healthy and you're playing both of yourselves and you're wasting time. Something that doesn't get refilled. And then number three, work on yourself. Put in as much effort as you do into dating, into growing and improving as an individual person. Take time to nourish the relationships that are around you that have been healthy and fruitful. Work on these things instead of settling for Mr. or Ms. Potential. Be reflective and be patient. Your person is coming, but be patient. Something that I've heard once that has always stuck with me is that this person said, if Satan can't get in front of you and stop you and block your blessing, then he gets behind you and pushes you. That sense of anxiety, that sense of urgency, sometimes that is not coming from a healthy or right or godly place. If you're feeling that push and that urgency, like one thing that I hear women say a lot, or I have to think about my clock. You don't know what God has in store for your body and your beloved ovaries. So take a moment and slow down. Don't immediately give into that urgency and that rush. Slow down, because when you're rushing and you're feeling panicky and you're in a sense of urgency and you're operating from a sense of emergency and you're not thinking clearly or straight, you start making rash decisions. You start saying things like, well, they ain't that bad, or at least they're not doing this, or at least they're not doing that. No. Slow down so that you can think clearly and make a decision that is not just for a moment, not just to relieve temporary pain or temporary stress and anxiety, but a decision that is going to impact the rest of your life. Until next time, guys, do not set up that Valentine's date with Mr. or Ms. Potential. If nothing else, give yourself time to heal and grow as an individual. Write down those non-negotiables. Think about what areas of your life that you could be improving on and working on. Nourish those relationships that are around you and just begging and urging for you to pour into them. And if nothing else, remember, faith helps.